Picture this. You're watching a classic dinosaur movie. What do you see? Misty jungles, right? Maybe a volcano erupting every 5 minutes, and a T-Rex roaring at a helicopter probably in a perpetual downpour. It's a great visual, full of drama, but honestly, it's got about zero accuracy when it comes to what Earth was really like when dinosaurs walked, or rather thundered, across it. The actual planet during the age of dinosaurs felt less like our world and more like something out of a sci-fi epic. Think one colossal supercontinent slowly tearing itself apart, air that would leave you gasping for breath, and plants that looked like they belonged on an alien moon. Forget everything you thought you knew, because in the next while, we're going to peel back the layers of deep time, and trust me, the real picture is about to get a whole lot stranger and, undeniably, way cooler. This isn't just about big lizards, it's about a planet in constant, dramatic upheaval, a world that continually rewrote its own rules. We're talking about an Earth that morphed through 3 distinct epochs: the Triassic, a harsh, dusty crucible; the Jurassic, a verdant, humid greenhouse; and the Cretaceous, a blooming, diverse world on the cusp of an unimaginable catastrophe. Each period held its own unique set of challenges and opportunities, shaping the very fabric of life and setting the stage for the incredible creatures that would dominate for over 165 million years. So, are you ready to ditch the Hollywood cliches and dive into the true, mind-bending reality of prehistoric Earth? Good. Let's begin. Section 1. Triassic, the dusty start, 252,201 million years ago. When the Triassic period kicked off, roughly 252 million years ago, Earth was in an almost unrecognizable state. Imagine looking down from space. You wouldn't see the familiar mosaic of continents we know today. Instead, there was just one colossal landmass, a supercontinent called Pangaea, sprawled across the globe like a gigantic C-shaped jigsaw puzzle piece left carelessly on a table. It was truly immense, a single, unbroken stretch of land that dwarfed any continent we have today. This wasn't some fleeting arrangement. Pangaea had been forming for millions of years, slowly coalescing from earlier continental fragments, and its very existence dictated the climate and life that could thrive upon it. This massive continental configuration meant there was no Atlantic Ocean to speak of. Not yet, anyway. The vast, open expanse around Pangaea was the Panthalassic Ocean, sometimes called the Super Ocean. And nestled inside that sweeping sea shape, where the Mediterranean Sea would eventually be, lay the Tethys Sea, a warm, tropical body of water that baked under an intense, brutal sun. The sheer scale of Pangaea had profound implications for its climate. With so much land concentrated into one mass, far from the moderating influence of oceans, vast swathes of its interior were bone-dry, arid deserts that made today's Sahara look like a lush oasis. We're talking about landscapes where rivers were often seasonal trickles, appearing only after rare, intense downpours, and lakes were typically shallow, salty, and prone to simply vanishing under the relentless heat. Speaking of heat, the average temperatures across much of Pangaea could hit a scorching 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Celsius, in the shade, if you were lucky enough to find any. This wasn't just a warm day, it was a perpetual oven. And if the heat wasn't enough to make you uncomfortable, consider the air itself. Oxygen levels hovered around a mere 15%. To put that into perspective, our modern atmosphere has about 21% oxygen. If a human were somehow dropped into the Triassic, they'd be gasping for breath like they'd just summited Mount Everest without supplemental oxygen. It was an environment that demanded extreme resilience, a planet that seemed almost actively hostile to life as we know it. So, what kind of vegetation could possibly survive in such a punishing world? Certainly not the sprawling forests or verdant meadows we're accustomed to. Triassic plant life was tough, low-growing, and built for drought. You'd see hardy cycads, often referred to as sago palms today, with their leathery, razor-sharp fronds designed to conserve precious moisture. Ginkgo saplings clung tenaciously to the edges of wadis, dry riverbeds that occasionally filled with water, and conifers, the ancestors of our modern pines and firs, stood like bottle brushes, their needles minimizing water loss. Crucially, there were no flowering plants, no grass, no vibrant blossoms, and certainly no amber waves of grain. The landscape was a muted palette of greens, browns, and grays, a stark, almost primeval vista. The animal cast during this period was still, shall we say, auditioning for their starring roles. Dinosaurs were just emerging, small and relatively inconspicuous. Early forms like Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus were agile bipedal predators, but they were barely the size of a Labrador retriever. They ran on two legs, darting through the sparse vegetation, primarily to avoid the true bullies of the Triassic ecosystem. These weren't dinosaurs, not yet. The dominant predators were things like phytosaurs, formidable crocodile-like reptiles that ruled the waterways, often reaching lengths of 10 meters, 33 feet. Then there were the big-headed amphibians, massive labyrinthodonts that were remnants of a wetter past, and perhaps most terrifying of all, the Rauisuchians. These were fearsome archosaurs, distant cousins to both crocodiles and dinosaurs, some of which could grow to the size of a rhinoceros, capable of biting a cow in half with their powerful jaws. It was a scrappy, dusty, and relentlessly hot world, the kind of place where every creature seemed to come equipped with spikes, claws, or armor, just to survive another day. Yet, despite its harshness, this Triassic incubator was precisely what set the stage for the eventual dominance of dinosaurs. This period ended with one of Earth's most catastrophic events, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. We're talking about lava flows on a scale almost impossible to comprehend. Imagine a landmass the size of modern Brazil, specifically along what would become the eastern coasts of North America and Northwest Africa, beginning to pour molten rock through vast fissures in the Earth's crust. This wasn't just a few volcanoes. This was the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, CAMP, erupting, a geological cataclysm that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. It dumped unfathomable quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by the gigaton, triggering intense global warming and widespread ocean acidification. The subsequent acid rain stripped forests bare, poisoning soils and waterways. Nearly half of all species, both on land and in the oceans, vanished forever. It was a true reset button for life on Earth. But out of those ashes, a new lineage emerged, poised to inherit this broken world. Dinosaurs, already heat-tolerant and fast-breeding, with their efficient respiratory systems and upright gait, were perfectly adapted to survive these cataclysmic changes. They waltzed into a newly emptied ecological landscape, ready for their moment in the sun. Section 2. Jurassic, the Greenhouse Takeover, 201-145 million years ago. As the Jurassic period dawned, the Earth was undergoing a monumental transformation. Pangaea, that monolithic supercontinent, was finally divorcing. It was a slow, agonizing split that began with North America gradually unzipping itself from Africa. This colossal geological event wasn't a quiet affair. It was accompanied by massive volcanic activity. Imagine a seam tearing open across the ocean floor, spewing molten rock and forming vast lava ridges that would eventually become the mid-oceanic ridges of the nascent Atlantic Ocean. This continental breakup wasn't just about rearranging land masses, it fundamentally reshaped the planet's climate and ecosystems. One of the most significant consequences of Pangaea's fragmentation was a dramatic rise in sea levels, surging by as much as 100 meters. This wasn't just a minor tide change, it transformed vast swathes of land. Much of what we now know as Europe and the Middle East became submerged beneath warm, shallow, coral-studded seaways. These epicontinental seas, stretching for hundreds of miles, created new coastlines and vastly expanded marine habitats. They also acted as massive heat sinks and moisture sources, profoundly altering global weather patterns. With the continents pulling apart and more water on the surface, humidity became the new norm. The once arid interiors of Pangaea were now exposed to moisture-laden winds from the expanding oceans. The result? A botanical explosion. Forests, dense and lush, erupted across almost every shoreline and well into the continental interiors. The higher sea levels meant more coastal areas, which in turn meant more opportunities for plant life to flourish. This oxygen-rich atmosphere fueled rapid, prodigious plant growth. Stepping into a Jurassic grove would have been an experience unlike anything possible on Earth today. Cycads, those hardy survivors of the Triassic, now grew as tall as modern oak trees, their sturdy trunks topped with enormous crowns of fronds. Tree ferns, some reaching dizzying heights, flared their ribbed fronds 10 meters overhead, creating a dense, multi-layered canopy. The undergrowth was a riot of smaller ferns, mosses, and liverworts carpeting the forest floor. The air would have been thick and heavy, like a tropical greenhouse, saturated with moisture and carrying the distinct, earthy scent of pine and damp moss. It was a world of deep, vibrant greens, a stark contrast to the muted landscape of the Triassic. Temperatures remained remarkably tropical, extending almost to the poles. This period was a true greenhouse Earth, with very little ice anywhere on the planet. Even regions like northern Alaska and southern Australia, which today experience frigid winters, were covered in dense forests of redwood relatives. And Antarctica. Far from being an icy wasteland, its ancient forests hosted a diverse understory of cycads and dragonflies the size of ravens flitted through the canopy. While winters certainly existed, frost was an extremely rare phenomenon in most places. The absence of polar ice caps meant that ocean currents circulated sluggishly, allowing warm waters to penetrate much further north and south, effectively locking in warmth across the globe and creating a remarkably equitable climate from equator to pole. With such an abundance of plant life and a stable, warm climate, dinosaurs answered with gigantism. This was the era of the true titans. Imagine a diplodocus, a magnificent long-necked sauropod, effortlessly waving its 30-foot neck above the canopy, stripping conifer needles by the ton to fuel its enormous body. These gentle giants were the largest land animals to ever live, shaping the very landscape with their immense appetites. And they weren't alone. Herbivores, like Stegosaurus, roamed the plains, carrying meter-wide bony plates along its back. These plates, once thought to be purely defensive, may have also flushed pink with blood to woo mates or intimidate rivals, adding a splash of unexpected color to the Jurassic scene. Predators, of course, kept pace with their prey. Allosaurus, a formidable theropod as long as a city bus, hunted in what we might call game park savannas, where ferns grew chest-high, providing ample cover for ambush. The explosion of life wasn't confined to land. Below the waves, the newly formed shallow seas teemed with marine reptiles. Sleek, dolphin-like ichthyosaurs sliced through the water, while long-necked plesiosaurs flapped their powerful flippers through vibrant coral cities, hunting fish and squid. Above them, the skies were equally alien and bustling. Pterosaurs, the flying reptiles, had diversified into an astonishing array of forms, some with wingspans comparable to hang gliders, launching themselves off seaside cliffs with breathtaking grace. And if that wasn't enough to make you feel like you'd stepped onto another world, consider the sky itself. Scientists theorize that during the Jurassic, Earth might have had 2 moons, our familiar companion plus a smaller satellite that eventually crashed into it. Days were also notably shorter, lasting only about 22 hours because Earth was still spinning faster than it does today. This more rapid rotation contributed to bigger, more powerful storms, churning the oceans and shaping coastlines. the entire planet hummed with an almost overwhelming energy, a vibrant, dynamic world bursting with life in every conceivable niche. Section 3. Cretaceous, the blooming world, 145 to 66 million years ago. By the time the Cretaceous period arrived, the Earth's map was finally starting to look like a drunken puzzle we might vaguely recognize. The continental drift had continued its relentless march, further fragmenting the land masses that were once Pangaea. South America and Africa had fully split, opening up the South Atlantic Ocean, a monumental event that forever changed ocean currents and global climate. India, a separate landmass at this point, had torn away from Gondwana and was sprinting north at an astonishing 9 centimeters a year, on a collision course with Asia that would eventually give rise to the Himalayas. Meanwhile, the tectonic forces were also at work on other fronts, initiating the slow, majestic uplift of the great mountain ranges we know today: the Rockies in North America, the Andes in South America, and the Alps in Europe. These rising mountain chains would profoundly influence regional weather patterns and create new habitats. Despite these dramatic geographical shifts, the Cretaceous remained largely a hothouse world. Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere soared past today's by 3 to 6 times, keeping global temperatures remarkably high. This is where things get truly fascinating. Even though polar nights had returned due to Earth-ES orbital tilt, the overall warmth meant these regions were far from frozen. Drill cores taken from 90-million-year-old Antarctic soil have revealed fossilized roots and pollen from palms, laurels, and magnolias. Yes, you heard that right. Palms in Antarctica. During summer, highs could reach a balmy 19 degrees Celsius, 66 degrees inside the Arctic Circle. While winter snow did fall, it never lingered, quickly melting to nourish the lush, temperate forests that thrived there. Imagine mangroves, typically found in tropical regions, hugging the shores of ancient Greenland. It was a world where lush vegetation extended from the equator right up to the poles, a testament to the planet's extreme greenhouse conditions. But perhaps the most revolutionary change of the Cretaceous was a botanical one: the arrival of flowering plants, or angiosperms. This was a true game-changer, a biological innovation that would forever alter the face of Earth. Angiosperms, initially weed-sized curiosities, raced through evolutionary time, becoming canopy dominants in less than 20 million years. Their rapid diversification was fueled by a brilliant new reproductive strategy: flowers. These vibrant, often fragrant structures attracted a whole new suite of partners, pollinators. By 80 million years ago, grass-like relatives of modern plants blanketed river deltas, providing a rich new food source for herbivores. Think about the duck-billed hadrosaurs, those incredible dinosaurs sporting battery teeth, with 500 grinding surfaces, perfectly adapted to process this new, fibrous vegetation. This co-evolutionary dance was spectacular. Bees, butterflies, and wasps evolved alongside flowering plants, forming the first intricate pollinator partnerships. This wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a fundamental shift in how ecosystems functioned. Flowers offered nectar and pollen, while insects provided efficient transportation of genetic material, leading to an explosion of biodiversity. And with flowering plants came an entirely new menu for herbivores: fruits, nuts, and berries. This abundance of new, energy-rich food sources drove further diversification among animals, creating a complex web of interactions that echoed many of the ecological relationships we see today. On land, dinosaur diversity exploded in response to these changing environments. This was truly the golden age of dinosaurs. Titanosaurs, magnificent long-necked sauropods, stretched an incredible 35 meters, 115 feet, and weighed up to 60 tons, shaking the ground with every step like living bulldozers. They were the dominant mega-herbivores, browsing on the highest branches. Meanwhile, Triceratops, with its iconic frill and 3 horns, browsed under flowering figs, its powerful beak shearing through tough vegetation, and, of course, the undisputed apex predator, Tyrannosaurus rex. This legendary carnivore patrolled fern prairies where, for the first time, autumn leaves turned brilliant reds and golds. Yes, the Cretaceous saw the very first autumns, as some deciduous flowering plants began to shed their leaves in response to seasonal changes, adding a vibrant, dynamic palette to the landscape. Out at sea, the oceans were just as wild and diverse. Mosasaurs, fearsome marine lizards reaching lengths of up to 15 meters, 50 feet, ruled the reefs built by rudest clams, bizarre, cone-shaped bivalves that looked more like twisted vases than modern clams. These mosasaurs were the apex predators of the marine realm, occupying a similar ecological niche to today's great white sharks or killer whales. Above them, in the skies, pterosaurs reached their absolute zenith. Quetzalcoatlus, a creature with a wingspan of over 10 meters, 33 feet, stood as tall as a giraffe when on the ground. These majestic flyers could vault across vast distances, soaring on thermal columns over ancient Texas, making modern birds seem almost diminutive by comparison. Birds themselves, the only lineage of dinosaurs still with us today, diversified rapidly, with both toothed enantiornithines and modern-style relatives filling various aerial niches. And what about mammals? They stayed largely mouse-sized, but crucially, they were getting brainier. These clever, adaptable creatures nursed their young in hollow logs, scuttling through the undergrowth beneath a canopy of plane trees, quietly honing the skills that would eventually allow them to inherit the Earth. Then came the ultimate curveball. 66 million years ago, a cosmic event of unimaginable magnitude brought this vibrant, thriving world to an abrupt and violent end. If you're finding this deep dive into Earth's ancient past as mind-blowing as we are, do yourself a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You won't want to miss our next episode, where we'll explore the incredible story of the mammals that inherited this broken world and, against all odds, turned it into something we'd almost recognize. Section 4. What did it feel like to stand there? Let's really try to immerse ourselves, shall we? Imagine, for a moment, stepping out of a time portal, not onto some generic prehistoric swamp, but specifically onto a late Cretaceous coastal Mexico, just a few million years before that fateful asteroid impact. What would it really feel like? The first thing that hits you isn't the sight, but the air. It's thick, humid, almost heavy, carrying a complex cocktail of scents. You'd smell the rich, earthy fragrance of unfamiliar flowers, perhaps the sweet perfume of ancient magnolias or the pungent aroma of evolving laurels. Mingled with that would be the salty tang of the ocean, a hint of decay from the dense vegetation, and maybe even a faint distant whiff of volcanic sulfur. Look up. Parrot-sized pterosaurs, perhaps a flock of pteranodon, or smaller ajdarchids, shriek overhead, their calls a cacophony of squawks and clicks, their leathery wings catching the light. Closer to the ground, dragonflies, some with wingspans that rival a small bird, whir past your ears like miniature model aircraft, their iridescent bodies glinting in the dappled sunlight. Then, a low rumble starts, barely perceptible at first, a deep vibration through the soles of your feet. It grows steadily, a rhythmic thudding that makes the very ground tremble beneath you. You realize it's not thunder, but an approaching herd of titanosaurs, 60-ton living bulldozers, their massive feet splashing through warm puddles dotted with lily pads the size of umbrellas. Each footfall sends ripples through the water, a visceral reminder of their colossal presence. The sky itself is a spectacle. It glows an odd, soft lavender at noon, tinted by lingering volcanic aerosols from distant eruptions and the sheer density of atmospheric humidity. The light has a different quality, diffuse and slightly otherworldly. And because Earth was still spinning faster, days lasted about 23 hours. This meant sunsets felt incredibly leisurely, stretching out into long, drawn-out spectacles of color that would paint the sky for what felt like hours. As dusk truly settles, fireflies, just like their modern descendants, would blink their bioluminescent signals in the dense mangroves, even in what would be our January. The seasons were milder, less distinct, creating a perpetual sense of lush, humid warmth. Gravity, reassuringly, feels the same. Your weight is familiar. But everything else? From the enormous, unfamiliar leaf shapes of the cycads and tree ferns, to the buzzing drone of insects that seem too large to be real, to the distant guttural calls of unseen predators, it all feels like a dream you're only half remembering. It's a world both breathtakingly beautiful and utterly unrecognizable. A truly alien experience that challenges every modern assumption about what Earth should look and feel like. Section 5. Common Myths Busted. Let's be honest, our collective imagination of the dinosaur age has been heavily influenced by popular culture, and while those portrayals are often thrilling, they've also propagated some persistent myths. It's time to bust a few of those wide open and replace them with the incredible, scientifically accurate reality. Myth 1. The age of dinosaurs was a non-stop lava party, with volcanoes erupting everywhere, all the time. Truth. While volcanic activity was indeed a significant geological force throughout the Mesozoic, especially during continental rifting events like the breakup of Pangaea, it wasn't a constant global inferno. Yes, there were massive eruptive phases, such as the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, CAMP, at the Triassic-Jurassic boundary, or the Deccan Traps toward the end of the Cretaceous. But these were episodic and regional events, not a perpetual planetary firestorm. For vast stretches of time and across immense geographical areas, the land was stable, verdant, and teeming with life. Most of the Earth, particularly during the Jurassic and Cretaceous, was covered in lush forests, not molten rock. Picture dense, ancient woodlands, not a barren volcanic wasteland. The volcanoes that did exist were often distant, their effects primarily climatic, through CO2 emissions, rather than directly destructive over large areas. Myth 2. Prehistoric plants were just dull, green fronds, making for a monotonous landscape. Truth. This couldn't be further from the truth, especially as the Mesozoic progressed. While the early Triassic was indeed dominated by hardy, often drab-looking conifers and cycads, the Jurassic saw an explosion of lush, diverse plant life. Imagine towering tree ferns and ginkgos, creating dense, multi-layered canopies. But the real game-changer was the Cretaceous. This period witnessed the rapid diversification of flowering plants, or angiosperms. This meant that by the mid to late Cretaceous, the landscape was bursting with colors. You'd see blossoms in vibrant purples, striking yellows, and pristine whites. These weren't just decorative, they were crucial for attracting the newly evolving insect pollinators. So, rather than a dull, monochromatic green, picture a world rich with varied foliage, textures, and the unexpected beauty of early flowers, painting the landscape with a palette far more diverse than many imagine. Myth 3. Dinosaurs, especially the big ones, dragged their tails heavily along the ground, leaving massive grooves. Truth. This is a classic movie trope that simply does not hold up to scientific scrutiny. For decades, illustrations and films depicted dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus rex or Brontosaurus, with their tails scraping the dirt. However, fossil trackways, those incredible preserved imprints of dinosaur movement, tell a very different story. These trackways consistently show no evidence of tail drag marks. Instead, anatomical studies confirmed that dinosaurs held their tails aloft, often using them as dynamic counterbalances. For bipedal predators like T. rex, The tail was essential for balance during locomotion and quick turns, acting like a giant rudder. For massive sauropods, the tail helped distribute their immense weight and provided stability. Imagine trying to run with a heavy, inflexible appendage dragging behind you. It's simply not efficient. Dinosaurs were far more agile and biomechanically sophisticated than the old tail-dragging image suggests. Myth 4. The entire Mesozoic era was uniformly hot, a perpetual tropical sauna. Truth. While it is true that the Mesozoic was generally much warmer than today, with higher average global temperatures and significantly less polar ice, it wasn't a monolithic sauna. The climate was dynamic, undergoing significant shifts across the three periods and exhibiting considerable regional and seasonal variations. The early Triassic was indeed characterized by extreme heat and aridity. However, the Jurassic became more humid and globally warm, a true greenhouse world. By the late Cretaceous, while still warm overall, there was a noticeable cooling trend and increased seasonality, particularly at higher latitudes. We have clear evidence, such as fossilized plant roots and pollen from Antarctica, indicating that while it hosted temperate forests, it also experienced distinct winters. In fact, some studies suggest that Antarctic winters during the late Cretaceous occasionally dipped below freezing at night, allowing for the partial shedding of leaves by some plants, essentially the first autumns for certain species. So, while you wouldn't have built a snowman at the North Pole, the idea of a single, unchanging tropical climate across 186 million years is a vast oversimplification. Myth 5. Mammals were helpless, insignificant victims, constantly cowering in fear of the mighty dinosaurs. Truth. This is another misconception that dramatically underestimates the evolutionary success and resilience of early mammals. While it's true that mammals remained relatively small throughout the Mesozoic, they were far from helpless victims. They were incredibly adaptable and diversified into a wide array of ecological niches. Many were nocturnal, allowing them to avoid the larger diurnal dinosaurs. They burrowed into the ground for safety, climbed trees, and developed keen senses of hearing and smell. They also evolved varied diets, with some becoming insectivores, others herbivores, and fascinatingly, some were even opportunistic predators. There's fossil evidence, like the discovery of Repenomamus robustus, with the remains of a juvenile Psittacosaurus in its stomach, demonstrating that some Mesozoic mammals were perfectly capable of eating baby dinosaurs when the opportunity arose. Far from being passive prey, these early mammals were tenacious survivors, co-evolving alongside dinosaurs, constantly innovating and quietly honing the traits, like increased intelligence, parental care, and warm-bloodedness, that would allow them to explode in diversity and dominate the Cenozoic era after the dinosaurs' demise. They were not victims. They were the ultimate underdogs who played a long game and eventually won. Conclusion. The takeaway. So, what have we learned from this journey back in time, this deep dive into Earth's ancient past? The most profound takeaway is perhaps this. Across nearly 200 million years, Earth didn't just host dinosaurs, it literally rewrote its own rulebook, time and time again. Continents, those seemingly immutable landmasses, merged into a single behemoth, then slowly, agonizingly, split apart, drifting across the planet's surface to form the familiar shapes we see today. Deserts the size of entire continents transformed into sprawling rainforests, only to shift again. Atmospheric oxygen levels rose and fell, profoundly influencing the size and scope of life. Flowers, those delicate beauties we take for granted, invented color itself, revolutionizing ecosystems and sparking a co-evolutionary dance with insects that continues to this day. Giants, creatures of unimaginable scale, evolved and vanished, leaving behind only fossilized whispers of their existence. The Mesozoic wasn't a static, unchanging green jungle, a monotonous backdrop for roaring beasts. It was a planet in constant flux, a dynamic, ever-evolving canvas far more intricate and breathtaking than any Hollywood special effect could ever hope to capture. It was a world of extremes, of profound geological forces and of relentless biological innovation. And when the dust finally settled from that cataclysmic asteroid impact, when the fires died down and the skies cleared, one tenacious lineage of small feathered dinosaurs kept flying. They kept singing, they kept adapting, and eventually they gave rise to the birds we see around us today, the living, breathing descendants of those long-lost cousins. Their survival, against all odds, offers a powerful lesson. Even the mightiest ecosystems, the most dominant forms of life, are temporary. Nothing lasts forever. But life itself, in some shape, in some form, always finds a new chapter, a new path, a new way to flourish. So, the next time you see a dinosaur on screen, or even just imagine one, take a moment to picture the real world under its feet. Envision the unfamiliar continents, still shifting and reforming. Gaze up at the alien skies, perhaps with two moons or an unfamiliar hue. Feel the humidity, smell the strange flora, and listen to the sounds of a world utterly unlike our own. It was a planet both breathtakingly beautiful and utterly unrecognizable, a testament to the incredible, ceaseless power of geological and biological change. And in understanding that, we gain a deeper appreciation for the precious, ever-changing world we inhabit today.